Thanks very much for joining us, Pablo, and welcome. If you could just start by just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Alex. My name is Pavlo. I'm a co-founder of this edtech platform called Mathema.me. We're focused on STEM tutoring for kids. And basically, the problem we are trying to solve is, hey, kids are struggling with math, right? And they really need help. So we started with tutoring, but our vision is way bigger than that. And prior to that, I led some products at Wise.com and Preply.com. And before that, I worked at MacPo, which is the largest independent Mac software developer in the world. Did some engineering jobs, and I started my career in marketing back in 2012, I reckon.
And did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
Not really. I kind of get this question a lot, and people are wondering, like, oh, like, what made you leave a job at Wise, and why did you decide to, take this entrepreneurship path? And what I think the real answer is that I seek impact, and I feel like if you're an entrepreneur, it's just the easiest way for you to feel like you actually drive impact. Because as you join a bigger company, your risk tolerance lowers down, right? You just take way less risks, and it gets harder and harder for you to see what you actually impact. And for me, entrepreneurship is more of a path that I think will lead me to the maximization of the impact that I could drive.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think when you're working at a large company, it's like your jobs become very siloed and it's hard to feel like you've got full control of your destiny and how much impact you can have, for sure, for sure. And
Yeah,
did,
and it's not necessarily a bad thing as well, because obviously they need to mitigate their risks, and in the end of the day, they need to care about their bottom level numbers, right? Bottom line numbers. And well, people like myself, who I mostly did products throughout my career, are there to make sure the metrics are being optimized. And in the grand scheme of things, corporates do not really need to care whether you have a full picture, whether you know, like feel impact, right? What they care about is whether your number moved up, right? And that's exactly why we're hired. So I do not think it's a bad thing. It's just, I think for some people at some stages of their career, it might feel like not enough.
do you ever find it difficult balancing impact and financial success? Because I know to start a business is difficult in itself. To start an impact business can also be double difficult. How do you find this?
Oh man, it's such a massive struggle. After I left Wise to focus full time on Mathema.me, I realized that I kind of miss getting paid the way I used to be paid at Wise, and I miss this nice fat paycheck I was getting. I mean, okay, it was not that fat. Wise salary bands are public, so you guys can go and check them out. So it's not crazy amount of money, but it's good money. It's way better than I'm paid nowadays, and I think, yeah, you miss this. You miss this financial security. But what you really miss as well is this nice, fancy, shiny brand behind your back. Like, when a person who works at Google comes into the room, you kind of feel there's some magical glare around them where they're just seen in a different way. Like if they built this kind of companies themselves, even though they could be doing the most boring shit on earth, but the fact that they work at Google kind of makes them being perceived different. And I feel like I kind of miss being perceived as someone big, right? Because obviously the companies that we are building, even though it's not a small one these days, we are now having like 7,000 students across multiple markets, and we do 35,000 lessons across markets. It's not a small thing anymore, but obviously comparing to Wise, it's a minuscule thing.
Yeah, I can totally get that and imagine like when you're working at big companies like Wise, there's a lot of benefits that come with it for sure, especially like the brand name. And what gave you the idea to start Mathema?
Oh, it's such a random thing, man. A friend of mine, well, now he became a friend, but back then he was just someone I knew, reached out to me saying, hey, you know what? You worked with Preply, and I have now tested something that is similar to Preply, but in mathematics and for kids. So, for context, Preply, the one of the probably largest online tutoring marketplaces in the world, and they're focused on language tutoring, English specifically. And I used to work there. I used to oversee their content pages, and then I helped them to build their subscriptions product. And because of that experience, my now co-founder approached me back then saying, hey, I tested this. Like I tested selling mathematics, tutoring in mathematics for kids. And it looks like parents are willing to pay for that. Why would we not try to scale it together? And to be completely honest, I barely knew the guy, but we met for a coffee and I was like, you know what? Why not? Let's try to build a side hustle. Let's try to build a small business together and see if it works. And we were building it for 3.5 years now. And I think what's funny about this product is that before we reached $1 million in sales, we didn't have any product. We started building the product when we realized that we can actually sell stuff. And we started in 2021 when funding was pretty much free. It was really easy to raise. When we started, people were just throwing money at us, but we decided not to fundraise back then. Then in 2022, when the war in Ukraine started and financial markets started to struggle, and we decided to raise. Obviously, we failed miserably. And then in 2023, we tried to raise again, and we again failed miserably. And in 2024, we became profitable. So we are no longer reliant on the external funding. So I think it's been a fun journey so far. But what really helped me to be involved until now was stability that was coming with my day-to-day job.
And you were spending a lot of time trying to raise. I know you just said you're profitable, but what are your thoughts on fundraising? Are you still trying to raise? Would you recommend it? Would you not?
I would say that now we don't really have a strong case for a fundraise. So we don't have initiatives that we cannot finance ourselves, which probably tells us that our vision is too small, which kind of scares me. That's another question that I've never been bothered with whilst working for someone where, you have your metrics to optimize and you're focused on that. But I feel like when you become an entrepreneur, you really need to make sure that your vision is fleshed out because it will kind of inform the direction of the entire company. So I think the fact that we don't have initiatives that we cannot finance ourselves is kind of scary. So we really need to do something about it. We don't have a strong case for fundraising just yet, but we will probably come back to this question early next year because we are now in the process of building plans for 2025. And I could totally see us scaling to other markets. And in our business model, is just expensive. So my assumption would be that it's gonna probably be like May next year when we might reopen the process.
And I love how you said about starting with no product. I think that's really good because I often see a lot of people spend hours developing a product and realize there's no market fit. So I think that's great how you've done that.
I think what really helped us, well, if that's the right word here, is that we didn't really have a tech co-founder when we started. Like I graduated as an engineer and I can code, but my core expertise is product these days. So I was like, there's no way I'm building any commercial software because I just don't think I'm a good person for that. But because we just didn't have this resource in the beginning, we decided not to. And then when we were making enough money to actually hire engineers, that's when we started to build it.
And how was that building without a product? How did you go about selling your services?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we basically just hired people straight away who were on commission and they were making money when we were making money, as easy as that. So our stack was a landing page, a CRM system that we just procured as a subscription as a service kind of model, and we also had a Google Calendar which was free. So that was our product effectively, and then we hired someone to do sales and someone to do support. And there you go, support did all the backend work, sales did all the sales, and we just had to figure out how to drive marketing, right? How to make sure we have enough teachers and enough leads. And I remember we would that at some point our Google calendars that we use as a central booking system for a platform had like 5,000 lessons or something in a month. And you could imagine every lesson was a little square in this Google calendar, like a little line, and it looked terrifying. I was like, No, man, like it just can't work like that. We can't scale like this. We probably need to spend a bit of money on the product. And because initially when we started, we just wanted to build a cash cow, we were just saving where we could. But that's where we realized, okay, we really need to do some investment here because there's no way we can be sustainable like that. But I think also what I learned is that, you know, how many founders lean on the publicly available advice like YC playbook or any other playbook for building a startup. And what these playbooks tell you that, hey, you need to have a technical co-founder. Hey, you need to quit your job straight away to focus on your product, blah, 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 blah. But I feel like every situation is so unique. Like, for instance, if you are someone like I'm an immigrant myself, right? I live in the UK, but I'm originally from Ukraine, that people could totally hear from my accent, I reckon. But for me, it would be next to impossible to just quit my job and, you know, rely on my startup because like London is an expensive city to be in, right? That's the first things. And then if you don't have a technical founder, it doesn't mean you cannot build stuff these days, right? With all the large language model, with all the no code solutions, you could totally build something and just see if it has legs. I would not lie, having technical people on your team does make a lot of difference. And indeed, in the beginning, you could benefit lots, but it doesn't mean that without having a person like that, you cannot start.
And you touched on, you said your plans for 2025. It'll be interesting to hear what your plans are and how you intend to grow.
Oh man, I think I was thinking around this is the following. So we know that the future is AI with live tutoring, right? It's just we need to figure out what's the most efficient model to blend AI with live tutoring, because we don't see the world where humans will be excluded from this process completely, but we know that humans will be augmented massively. So we will definitely do lots of initiatives here. Like, for instance, we are now experimenting with creating digital avatars for our tutors, and we look at how it impacts customer behavior, how they look at it, how they perceive information from tutors like that. And also, we are now we are currently focused at the age group from 10 to 18 years, and we want to tap into a market of, let's say, smaller kids. Not entirely sure that's the correct way of saying it, but we want to target an age group that is below 10. For that, we experimented with a different form of teaching, where instead of working with the tutors, they're going to work with, well, I would call them mascots, but it's like a cartoonish sort of video streaming environment where they could be more entertained and potentially more engaged. So that's on the tutoring side. And also, obviously, as a business, we want to improve our margins. And for that, we will experiment with other products such as pre-recorded courses, generated courses, whatever self-paced courses we could produce, and see if we have enough expertise to actually sell it, because the margins are just way better. So those are two directions we think about. At the same time, obviously, scaling to other markets will be a question. We haven't yet picked what the next market's going to be. We tested our model in Turkey and also in the UK. Both work quite well, but in the UK, it's just more expensive to acquire customers. And I don't think that our value proposition is strong enough in order to lower our customer acquisition cost. At the same time, market dynamics in Turkey is very similar to market dynamics in Eastern Europe. So our customer acquisition cost is extremely low, but also parents' willingness to pay is lower. So we'll need to find a healthy trade-off, which market to prioritize.
And does there come difficulties with expanding in terms of like languages and localizing content?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. So what people do not appreciate is that scaling languages is sort of easy, because when you do language tutoring, it means that you could hire a person in Philippines, let's say, and then make them teach people in the US. So there's a massive geographical arbitrage, because language rules remain the same regardless of the country. The only thing that changes is the accent. And when people just start to learn a language, they don't really care about the accent. Most of them don't. But when it comes to school program, like to school curriculum, especially in mathematics, The problem is that every country has different curriculum, and most of the countries have more than one curriculum. And countries like Germany, for instance, have like 13 curriculums because every sort of district of the country would have a different curriculum. So you have a complexity on the curriculum level, but also you have a complexity on the language level, which means your opportunity for geographical arbitrage is really, really low. So whenever you enter a new market, you really need to figure out how to crack your supply locally, how to acquire tutors locally, how to make sure you can facilitate payouts, how to make sure your tutors won't have any problems with getting this income. So that's something that needs to be cracked prior to launching. And also, obviously, because we do rely on manual sales, you need to figure out your sales process, right? You need to hire your head of sales. You need them to build your sales team. You need to make sure your marketing is localized. And you just need to make sure that your brand does not look dodgy when you come to a new market. And I feel like that's the most problematic bit that most founders do not appreciate. They just Google Translate a page, go to a new market, and voila. But it's not how it works. We failed miserably when we tried to scale in Poland for the first time. We failed second time when we hired a person that was not able to execute on sales the way we needed them to execute. And it took us more than a year to actually figure out how to replicate our processes that worked really well in Ukraine, in Poland. And even though those markets seem to be similar, but in fact they're so different, payment methods are different, curriculums are different. Parents have very different expectations from what their kids should learn and how they should learn. Uh, all of the things you don't really understand them until you try to scale, and it does help big time having someone from the market who could tell you and take your little hand and walk you around all the corners that you don't see when you start.
And moving on from business talk, so you're obviously a founder of an edtech platform. Like, what's your interest in edtech, and how do you like to learn in your free time?
Oh, that's a great question. I was telling you just now that I'm learning French because my partner is French, and I really want to communicate with her 93, I reckon, year-old grandma, who obviously does not speak English. So that's why I learned French, and I really try to immerse myself with the language. So I do Preply, live tutoring with Preply. Then obviously I do Duolingo. Then I just try to read some kids' books. So those are my kind of sources. And then now I feel like I reached that level where I could kind of maintain a very basic conversation. And since my girlfriend is French, I'm trying to speak to her in French, which obviously sounds silly and probably she thinks I'm a retard, but it kind of helps me. And I think to your question, I feel what's problematic is that when we grow older, we kind of forget how exciting it is to learn. Because we're so used to instant gratification. Like, for instance, people in tech like myself, we normally live in these quarterly cycles, right? We live in these small iterations, and we are so used to see our impact like on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis even. But the problem is that when you really learn something new, like, impact does not happen so quick, right? You really need to put hours into it before you can see that you are starting to achieve something. Like, same with sports, right? I do quite a bit of sports, and for the longest time I felt like actually it's not getting me anywhere, right, in terms of my physics, in terms of my stamina. But then at some point I stopped to care about this, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do it anyways because it just makes me feel better. And then I remember I went to the mirror in my bathroom and I was like, oh shit, I actually look better than I used to look, right? It's not about my weight, like it's not about like the way I want it to be. But when I stopped to care about the person who I think I want to become, I actually started to look better in a way, which was really weird. It's just, I think sometimes, like, I read this quote once, which went like, you just need to commit and keep showing up, right? And I feel like we do underappreciate the importance of showing up. So whenever you learn new stuff, just embrace the struggle, right? Like, it's gonna be hard, but you will be happy big time when you see the first results.
Totally, yeah. I think when you're trying to achieve something, progress doesn't. You cannot always see it because you're living it every day. But if you just keep showing up and looking back in like a year, you were then able to see like, wow, how much I've achieved. Whereas every day it doesn't seem that way. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
get that.
especially when you're building a business as well. So,
Hmm.
with my co-founder, we regularly have these whining sessions when one of us is very not satisfied with our progress, and then we try to reflect on everything that we managed to build in the last few months, like problems we managed to solve, both operational but also marketing problems, product problems, etc., etc. We do all of this, and then we're like, oh, okay, so it's not like we did fuck all, right? We actually did something. It's just it's really easy to lose it in your day to day because you're so, as a founder, you're so focused on solving problems, and you are not focused at all in celebrating your achievements. Like, for instance, my co-founder came to visit me in London a few weeks ago, and we closed September with really good numbers. So we're like, oh, we really need to celebrate. We just need to kind of celebrate big time. And we went out, we had one cocktail outside, and we came back to sleep. That was it, really. So I think we really need to spend more time celebrating our achievements.
I think that's a natural entrepreneur thing. It's like once you hit a high standard, then that's a standard and you want to hit more. And then if you don't hit it, you become disappointed. It's like, when do you have time to, just like you say, celebrate and get excited? So I
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
get
yeah.
that.
No, true.
And this could be for entrepreneurship or anything. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? Or the worst?
Ah, oof. I think the best quote that keeps me going is that wanting to quit is all right. Actually, quitting is not. Where I think that, I mean, the biggest change that I had to get used to when I kind of moved fully into this entrepreneurship career is that, like, every problem is in your business is kind of your problem. And when I was an employee, obviously I had to deal with lots of annoying stuff, but there was some stuff that I could be just, okay, there are other people to solve it, right? And even though it was kind of my problem as I was a PM, but still I would find someone to solve it for me, because somewhere in the org we should have someone who is more experienced in solving stuff. But then here, when you're an entrepreneur, especially early stage, you don't really have a resource, right? You don't have like people who could solve every problem, right? And it's not like you need to babysit them. You just sometimes need to get your hands dirty and figure this out. I remember recently I was dealing with figuring out how to pay our taxes in the US. And even though we have a consultant, still, like, there were many issues related to that. And for me personally, it's the least exciting thing to work on. Like, nothing could be more boring than that, right? And trust me, like, during this week of taxes, I asked myself a million times whether I really want to be an entrepreneur. Like, I was so desperate that at some point I started to check job boards. I was like, maybe I should just find a job somewhere because I just can't do this shit. But then, this week goes on, and like, you somehow figure this out. Somehow it sorts itself, and yeah, and you are done, and you are back to exciting stuff. And I think, when people who do sports would appreciate this quote. Sometimes you go to a class and class kind of sucks, right? You really struggle, but then it's going to be over in 50 minutes, right? So you can also try to stick around for the next 50 minutes. You might put a bit less effort, you might try to slack on a few reps, but you're still there, right? You've still done a class. And for me personally, I think it's important to remember that you should also enjoy it. It should not be just eating broken glass, right? You should also have some fun.
Certainly, entrepreneurship is definitely like that in the sense that you get to do some amazing things, but then you're responsible for everything and you've got to do all the boring stuff like taxes. And then you're like, wow, I never signed up for this.
Yeah, no, exactly. You don't realize what you step into when you start.
Yeah, yeah. And the problem is that doesn't get advertised. When you see the advertisements of entrepreneurship, they don't they don't
Ah, no,
tell you
man. When
about
you
that.
read another TechCrunch article, you know a thing that these people had to, figure out their taxes.
Exactly. Exactly. Thanks very much for joining us, Pablo. It was great to have you on a great episode.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. If you guys are interested to learn more about us, about Mathema, about the business, you could find me on LinkedIn and just follow. Also, I write on Substack. So if you're keen on, reading some of my thoughts, you could subscribe. It's free. I never charge for anything. It's just pure vibes. And Alex, thanks for inviting me. Yeah, and so interesting, man. So you're focused on edtech as a consultant, and you normally do data and do analytics.
Yeah, data analytics and growth. So, like,
Mhm.
let me give you an example. Say you've got a language school, not necessarily edtech, but an educational
Yeah,
school. You might want to go, hey, we're in a language school. We want to launch in Spain. How do we do that? We'd go get you the
yeah.
data, and it's like strategy and data, the intersection of the two.
And how do you normally work? Like, is it like you sell a project, or you're on a retainer, or you're a consult? Like, how does it? What types of engagements do you normally have?
So we've got one company on a retainer. Then they're
Mm.
like a franchising business. We help them understand like how they can franchise their business outside of different markets. That's the only retainer. Other than that, it's like on a project basis. So normally, like a client will come to us and we'll say, like, "Hey, what do you need?" And they'll say, "Our recruitment's terrible," and then we'll sort of try and understand and get to the problem of why you aren't recruiting right. So, like,
Um,
essentially, we go in and solve problems, but then we do like it's essentially like expansion, growth, marketing strategy, and all these sort of things. Yeah, yeah.
okay, cool. Yeah, I'll keep you in mind for when we scale, because sometimes we really need some external support, and it's cool to know that you provide services like that.
Yeah, sure, sure. Always happy to help. And if you ever even have any growth questions, like I'm always happy to answer because I enjoy what I do. So always happy to keep learning about the market and keep people up to date. So yeah.
Thanks, mate. Thanks a
Well,
lot.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me over.
Yeah, thanks for joining. See you later.
Bye bye.
Bye.